Welcome everyone, I'm Pete Bain with a video demonstration of a local landscape done in oil. This is painted from a photo I took while on a hike with my younger daughter back in March when we went up to Ipswich, Massachusetts to Cranes Beach, and we hiked a 3-mile loop down the beach, returning through the dunes behind the beach. If you're familiar with the area, you know that the beach is spectacular, but I highly recommend walking the dune paths behind the beach. Um, the area is just crisscrossed with soft white sand paths that wind through these hills of seagrass and beach heather. So it's really beautiful. But getting to the painting, the demonstration. So let's jump right into the demonstration. I will say that I have completed the drawing and a monochromatic underpainting, and so I'm about to begin the block-in at this point. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy it. All right, for this piece, I began with a monochromatic underpainting that I did with transparent red oxide and a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I really was able to nail down the drawing and the values of all the major shapes. And from this point on, it was very straightforward to begin to lay in and block in my major masses. The sky I did with ultramarine blue and quite a bit of white, and then I did this distant landmass with some ultramarine blue and a bit of cad red to make that deep purple color. Having a well done underpainting makes blocking in the correct values and colors much easier and faster. At this time I've mixed up a very dark violet color, and I'm following the underpainting for clues to where all those deep shadows are. So once I've really set that skeleton of where the darkest darks are, I decided to lay in my sand color. The sand is the lowest part of the ground, the vegetation's on top of that, so I thought that was a good idea, because when I go do that beach heather, it'll fall across and over a lot of this sand work that I'm doing here. So I thought that was the best passage of the painting to paint in, to block in at this point. So I mixed that white sand color with my permelba white, a little bit of yellow ochre, a drop of alizarin crimson, and just a touch of ultramarine blue to gray it down. Next, I moved on to the vegetations. Those are the beach grasses in the background, which I did mostly with yellow ochre. And now this is the beach. This is the heather I'm painting here, and it's got that beautiful pinkish gray color, goes to green in some areas. So I'm modifying my mixture as I move around this whole big mass of vegetation. I'm using it was phthalo green plus cad red, and then I would modify it. I'd add either a little yellow ochre to it, or ultramarine blue, or a little bit more of the cad red, depending upon what I was seeing in the photo reference. But again, this is the block-in, so I'm not really concerned about highlights and shadows. I just want to get the big mass in with the general value. And just as a reminder, I do try to follow the fat over lean rule. So the underpainting I had done with quite a bit of my thinner, and I'm using Gamsol. And then as I go into this block-in, I'm switching to my medium, and I use liquid here. And as I proceed to the next level of paint, I'll be using less and less liquid and more just straight paint out of the tube. One of the challenges with this particular image was really settling upon a color and a value for all of this beautiful beach heather. And you can see here I've just added a bit of green to the mixture. The paint's quite wet still, so I can modify it freely. And I won't be satisfied until to the last stroke of the brush, as you'll see. But you know, it's at the end of the day, if it's the right value, you know, you can interpret these colors in different ways. There are greens in there, there are reds, there are ochres, but they're all a beautiful soft gray color. It just changes depending upon your perspective, the time of day. Yeah, so I do work this vegetation over and over, but I feel like it's, by the end of the painting, it was worth the effort. I'm fairly pleased with the results. You'll want to make sure you capture those shadows at the base of the beech heather. That'll help give them form and structure. They are three-dimensional, like a blanket on that sand. And now I'm paying attention to those pines. There are 4 or 5 of them, but I've just decided to make 3 of them visible in this image. I think that small one in the distance gives some nice perspective, and it helps to balance. And the one on the right serves as a nice fulcrum, helping to balance the 2 on the left side of the painting. For this first pass of the sunlight on the needles of those pine trees, I'm using cad yellow with cad red to make a nice orangey color, and I'm just adding a touch of phthalo green to that, and that keeps a nice orangey warm green. And now you see I've really completed the block in, and I feel like I'm ready to do another pass at each of these big shapes. I'll start with the sky, reinforce what I've done, refine the shape of the landmass behind it, and now I'm correcting the color and the value of the landmass behind it, making it a richer blue. As I rework this passage of sort of dried seagrass in the background, I'll pay more attention to the edges, gradating the color from darker to lighter towards the horizon, making sure you know that the horizon line is straight and accurate, and that it's a soft line. It's not too sharp. I'll cover over any of the heavy drawing lines that I've left exposed. Put a bit of white on the horizon to reflect the distance and atmosphere, to show that it's receding in space, in three-dimensional space. Adding little hints of exposed sand throughout the composition, and hopefully tie it together a bit with that stark white sand path. You'll see a relationship throughout the vegetation. You'll see peaks of the sand poking through. Now I'm going back into my shadows underneath the heather, thinking about the edges as they move upwards. They blend into that lighter vegetation. The darker vegetation sort of blends into the lighter vegetation. The cast shadow from that pine tree was beginning to look a little odd to me, like an open alligator mouth. And so I brought it, I sort of unified it, and that's something, if I had taken more time during the underpainting, I could have worked out, and so that was, an unnecessary change. But it's oil paint, and you can rework it as much as you like to, as long as you like to. So I did that, and Now adding more color into the heather. I want it to read as a richer, more vibrant plant. So some purples and pinks going in there at this time. I'm fairly satisfied with the overall colors and values in that heather, and now I'm beginning to think about where the highlights might be, where the little rises are in the valleys, what's receiving more sunlight. And so I'm starting to put some highlights on the upper edges of where the little dune rises might be, and where the plant is catching more of the sun to give it that three-dimensional form. Here's another change in my thought process mid-painting, and I am wont to do. I'm looking at that distant landmass and I'm wondering if maybe a peak of the ocean should be showing through there. The beach is just 100 yards off to our right, and Plum Island is up to the north, and to the left that mass is Little Neck in Ipswich. But there's water out there, and I thought as a beach scene, as a sandy painting, we should have a little ocean poking through back there. So I'll change these land masses. There we go. I tried to add an ocean blue color there between the two land masses, just to give a sense of distance and depth. I'm making these shadows here, these cast shadows on the sand, a little bit more interesting. Push them towards the violet. They were a little dead, little brown. I think it's a little more romantic to have them violet in color. And I wanted to show some footprints along the path to indicate the presence of people. And these footprints have there are divots, so one side is in shadow and one side is in sunlight, so you'll see this balance of bright and darker sand throughout the footprints. Now I'm popping up the faces of the sand that are receiving lots of the sunlight, putting a few more little holes where the beach heather doesn't completely cover the ground or the sand. Adding a bit more warmth to the needles of this pine tree and working on their edges just so they read a little bit more natural. Decided to add that pine tree right there where the path turns. Warming up this shadow. Now I'm adding some of the highlights onto the pine tree. So this is the last step where I'm at. It's mostly cad yellow and a little bit of the phthalo green to really punch up that color. This is some edge work on those masses of heather in the foreground to make sure that we've got nice soft edges between the shadow and the light side. I felt the shadow on that sand was a little out of alignment with the position of the plants, so I sort of moved it north. But the painting is pretty close to done. It's the point where I need somebody to tell me to stop, not to overwork it any more than I already have.